you very much. Can I get where are my glasses? I left my glasses then.
Thank you very much. I was saying, Mangele, why you can't share my baking? Thank you very much, Program Director, Notlaganipo. Sanbonan. Uyazilenda ba ye-COVID yenza ukuthi kubande nje. If there was no COVID, ngabagcwele la. So manje, because we have to observe the COVID regulations, but it is important for me to first introduce myself. My name is Nongaba Mulwele, and I'm the Speaker of Council in Johannesburg. Program Director, allow me to take this opportunity to officially welcome and acknowledge everybody present today in this dialogue. As you said, that we have people online. We appreciate their presence and making time to be part of this dialogue. And also thank you very much to all ladies and gentlemen who are here today, physically as well. This is a dialogue on the role of local government in the fight against gender-based violence. Allow me to acknowledge specifically the following guests. We have the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Honorable Dade Solomon Lichisa Sinodi. Libisola Solomon Negesan. You spent that. Thank you very much for making time for being here. We know you are very busy there. When they call you there, Mr. Speaker, you know, we watch the sessions there. There is that term that you said, I want to put it here. Allow me to greet the MMC of Finance in the city of Johannesburg, Councillor Matidiso Mfikwe, who is a breadwinner. Welcome our breadwinner. We have MMC of Health and Social Development, Councillor Eunice Mbrina, who is connected online because she had another engagement that she had to attend to in the morning. I'm not sure whether she is able to show the face, but I saw her earlier that she had connected. We also have Miss Lisa Vetten. I think we will see them when they speak, who is a research project consultant in the Faculty of Humanities at UJ and research associate at Wits. We also have Miss Nazel Gooding, who is the Deputy Representative of the UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Office. We have Miss Giselle May, social activist and GBV coordinator. We also have the stakeholders that are represented in this meeting, the Daddies and Babies NGO. We have Basadi Eme NGO. We have Nabai Foundation. We have Basadi Pili Skills Development. We have Men in Black Ducks and Right Abuse and other present stakeholders. I wish I can mention all of you, but those whom I did not mention, it's not because you are not important. You are important. And thank you very much for attending. My greetings to the officials who are present, both online and physical, from the city of Johannesburg and other spheres of government. Members of the media, you are most welcome and good afternoon. Program Director, allow me to open today's engagement by observing a moment of silence in memory of all women who lost their lives due to gender-based violence. If I can just mention a few, Obo Precious Ramabula, Jessie Hess, Abo River Stienkam, Utani Kamalo, Uinene Mkhwejana, Karabo Mkwena, Sikufa Zopule, Sindisiwe Mnguni. There are many others. This morning I was watching television before I left home, And I saw that there's a woman who has been chopped into pieces. Wafakwa kudibek, ama-pieces work. And also, there was a case also this morning of a man who was appearing in court who killed his pregnant girlfriend. So there are many others in and outside of the spotlight who have been killed. But we know that women are being killed every day, especially in August. When we say this is a woman's month, it's more women are being killed. So, ladies and gentlemen, may we please stand and observe a moment of silence in prayer and meditation for these women, especially their families. Thank you very much. May their souls rest in peace. Ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to be in a room with ladies and gentlemen who share the same passion for gender equality and whose sole aim is to eradicate gender-based violence in our lifetime. Men and women whom I would like to believe seek to champion change in our society, because gender-based violence is a societal problem. It's not a problem of individual families or individual people, but it is a societal problem that needs the whole society to engage on this stage. Men and women who are taking up arms against all forms of injustices perpetrated by other men against women. Can I remove this because I'm alone here on stage? I'll put it back when I go to my seat. I'm saying that men and women who are taking up arms against all forms of injustices perpetrated by other men against women, against children, and the LGBTIQ plus community. Men and women who are honorable and commendable in our society. Men and women with a deep understanding that gender-based violence has been harrowing for the women of our city and women of our country. We know that we as women are faced with triple burden of oppression, having been discriminated against based on our race, gender, and class. Added to this is the unprecedented levels of femicide that we bear witness to, especially the soaring levels that we witnessed under this pandemic. It's even worse now with the COVID-19 pandemic. We also know that this scourge is a profound and widespread problem in our country, impacting on almost every aspect of the life of a woman and individuals from the LGBTIQ plus community. Gender-based violence and femicide in particular disproportionately affects women and girls, as it is systematic and deeply entrenched in cultures and traditions in South Africa. And because GBV is systematically entrenched, it must systematically be uprooted from its patriarchal roots. So we have to be systematical, in fact, in uprooting it, because we have to uproot it. We can't live like this. So that means that it is men also that need to be in the forefront in the fight against gender-based violence. When we deliberate and discuss this topic as a society, I know, and in most instances, we tend to focus largely on the role of women. How are we going to deal with the gender-based violence? And rightfully so, because we are the most affected. But the narrative needs to begin to shift, because there are many role players that need to come to the fore in the fight against gender-based violence. And they need to start featuring more and more as it relates to their contribution to this fight. So we want to see amadoda at the forefront of fighting gender-based violence. I am pleased, however, that we are slowly beginning to see this shift. As I said, that we need to involve men and boys, but slowly we are beginning to see what now we shift. I'm glad that programs like this are beginning to show a change in the current, because we do have men in the room, like I've introduced our leader here, Untateli Chisa, and there are also men in the room. There are men online. There are also men who are active in the fight against gender-based violence. Ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of today's engagement is really aimed to continue putting the spotlight on the gender-based violence in our society, for we must never tire to talk about this sketch. I know, Uti, in the past days, we have been focusing more on the pandemic, on the disease that we are faced with in the country, but we must not tire. We must always talk about gender-based violence. Every time it shows its ugly head. You know, it also seeks to give a form of feedback to communities, this kind of engagement on the city's plans and progress to date. That is why we have the MMCs from the city here who will be telling us what are the city's plans. Because as we know, the issue of GBV has been on the government agenda for the longest of times, all spheres of government. We've had our president talking about the gender-based violence, talking about the plans of the country in combating this scourge. It is also to reflect in partnership with our communities what more their local government can do to accelerate the progress in the space, but also what can the society do in assisting government in fighting gender-based violence. As I said, this is a societal problem. So we need the society to also be active participants in fighting gender-based violence. Finally, it is to amplify the voice of men in this topic. Like I said earlier, men must begin to walk this journey with us as women, with us as a society. Men must become more vocal. More importantly, they must occupy a more active role and mobilize on our behalf, on behalf of the society, to fight against their own counterparts who are the abusers. We have men's organizations that are saying, not in our name. So we need more of those organizations. So with those role players that we have identified, my view is that we are well on the right path of reflecting and improvement as we move forward as a country. I thank you very much for your presence today, those who are in the theater and those who are on online platforms. I trust that this discussion will be fruitful and bear fruits, because it is not assisting that we have gatherings, we talk, we discuss, but there is no action and there is no change. So I hope that such discussions will really bear fruits and we will see change, and we will see most of these people, these perpetrators, being arrested and serve the sentence that they deserve, but also the reduction and ultimately the end to gender-based violence. Thank you very much. Ngiyabonga. Enkosi. Ngiyalibonga.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for those very, very wise words and for that great opening. My takeaway from what Madam Speaker has said is that we must never tire to talk about gender-based violence. That's the first thing. She also talks about the importance of the role of the man, which is what we are going to unpack in this particular session. And also to give feedback to the communities on the plans of the city, which I think is very important, because as local government, we have been in many discussions with women in particular and on their particular challenges. And I think at this point in time, I was just to give feedback to say, how far are we in terms of the plans that we have as it relates to gender-based violence. So I'm going to hand over to the MNC Finance, MNC Frequent, who is going to give us the message of support. Thank you.
Okay. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Sanibona. Nakodwa awushaya ingoma angikwazi ukucula mina ngithi mawucula bathi thikuthula ngoba ngikwazi ukucula. Let me acknowledge our Deputy Speaker, National Deputy Speaker, Tate Tenuti. Acknowledge my own Speaker, Madam Nonqaba Mulwane. I was sitting next to that lady, I forgot to ask him, hello, hi. You are acknowledged, you pardon me, and acknowledge all of you and our listeners online, in the offices and at home. I appreciate the opportunity to represent the Executive Mayor. I'm actually representing the Executive Mayor, who has submitted his apology for not being able to join the Speaker today in this event. Madam Speaker, during an emergency parliamentary session in 2017, our president said the figures for violence against women and children were similar to those of a war-torn country. At the time, 2,700 women and 1,000 children were killed, whilst 100 women were raped, and these rapes occurred daily. Ladies and gentlemen, we are facing a scourge as we move over. The president has rightfully declared that gender-based violence is a full-blown pandemic, second next to COVID. The question is, how do we deal with the senseless murders of women, mostly at the hand of their loved ones, an indication of how our society really values a woman's worth in our times. Just to give a bit of statistics, in 2020, 42,291 rapes occurred in our country. 7,749 sexual cases were reported in South Africa. 2,076 attempted sexual assault cases were reported in our beautiful Mozambique. 1,179 contact sexual cases were reported in 2020 in this country of ours. That we say is possible, is alive with possibilities. Madam Speaker, the president was not exaggerating, and we must remember that these are not just statistics, but they are our sisters, they are our daughters, they are our children's friends, but they are people that we're living with in our communities, which naturally should be protected. They are also our relatives, they are our colleagues. The painful part is that in most of these situations, perpetrators are widely known and are well known even in our communities. Madam Speaker, I'm really encouraged by the recent resuscitation of your program, the Moral Regeneration Movement. It is evident that besides law enforcement, we need a renewed reflection as society because we are gradually falling off our rails. We also need to determine what is overlooked in the process. How many talk shops, conferences, symposiums, and summits are we holding regularly? By the very next day, or even hours after those meetings, you will find that a woman from those sessions gets violated. The stories are harrowing. They are horrendous, blood-chilling. Women are killed. I've written here like animals, which is a reality. Animals are not supposed to be killed either, but we don't respect our women. A statistical breakdown of women murders in our country. 2015-16, 2,780 women were killed in South Africa. 1617, 2,639 were killed in South Africa. 1718, 2,930 were killed in South Africa. 1819, 2,771 were killed in our country. 1920, 2,695. I must hasten to say, these are statistics because they are recorded. How many more are not recorded? How many more are not even found? But I said about she never came back, and we don't know their whereabouts. On the 21st of August, Madam Speaker, 2019, women disappeared and the country stood up. But even today, we're still seeing young girls being killed. It later emerged that she was actually murdered by someone or a handling. So this person decided, I'm going to take and kill her, robbing her of her youthness, robbing her parents of a beautiful, beautiful daughter. Nosicelo Mthembeni, a student at Fort Hare University, also disappeared. The two of them disappeared during Women's Month. It then emerges she was also killed by a man that she has decided to end the relationship with. How can it be that during Women's Month, we're still collecting statistics of young women and women being killed or sexually violated by their partners or people that they know? We are painfully reminded that women's bodies has started to become or continue to become a crisis in our beautiful country. So as women, as society, we need to have a different take. Deputy Speaker, I have an issue that I always raise when I speak on such platforms. Madam Speaker, you know, government and everybody is focusing on the girl child. I'm not saying let us stop focusing on the girl child. They still need to be empowered. They still need to be protected, but we have neglected continuously the perpetrator. I think it is time, even in this session, that we start talking about empowering the boy child, so that we start to create a new man. We start to create a boy child that understands that we as women are their equal partners, are not something to be kicked, not a ball to be used or to be abused. And here is my problem, Deputy Speaker and Madam Speaker. I always use this example. I lost my mother in 2015. Part of the people that came to see this kept on saying, first born, so I guess I did not have to cry because everybody else had to cry, but not me. We must be strong for the children. At a point, I got irritated by those words. And I asked her, how until is Kala? Because this is my mother. This is my mother. As mothers, this is what we do to our children. We do the same thing. Then this boy child hides their emotions, hides the pain, grows up with the pain. So when he has grown up, because we as mothers have taught the child not to be emotional. And we teach our boy children not to accept rejection, not to accept failure. We don't teach them that they must have room for failure. We don't teach our boy children not to have room for disappointment. The minute you get disappointment, you tend to be a bully. And again, I'm speaking to the mothers here. I'm not speaking to the daddies because daddies have their own issues to deal with. But the mothers, it's us who are not assisting society in grooming responsible men. So we must stop saying to Madam Simani, hi, licking. That looks like my son. I'm a mother of two boys. I've taught them to cry. And I tell them, and but I'm teaching them to take out emotions. Because then someone knows that they must be emotional with me And so they must be emotional with anybody. So now we are packaging our kids. But now we're around there. About ke bannanyana ke bontatenyana gore motho o na le mme wa hae bile mme wa hae ke mosadi wa hae so ntse a mo phegela mothatsitse dipotlo. That is why we developing stereotypes, boys. So when the government are trying to be different, that assists us in contributing to society, in turning around our boy children. They must wash dishes, they must cook, but clean, no good cook. I don't know what I do when I'm game, I had a game, PS what. The PS what live in when the girl child is actually slaving in the house. So let us start now saying as society, we're getting to deal with the perpetrator. And not that our boy kids are perpetrators, but grow them into responsible men. Government is not doing that. There are NGOs that are beginning to do that. But I think we need a concerted effort in us dealing with the boy child so that we create a new man, a different man from these men that see women as their toys, that see women as someone that has no view. How Toma all, so the fact that you are so independent scares some men because men were taught to be superior. Society has taught the men that you are superior. And because their parents taught them that way. So I'm asking society and I'm asking all of us here, the one thing that we need to do is to talk about developing a different and a new man, a loving, caring, a man that understands that a woman, even if she disagrees with him, is not undermining or disrespectful. Another case of DPP that we don't talk about is girl child abuse. We woke up from the normal. Okay, so Madam Speaker. 2 weeks ago, Deputy Speaker, the Ministry of Health in Gauteng responded to a question in the legislation and said in Gauteng there are so many young kids that have given birth to children. The first category, 10 to 14 years, they've given birth. For me, that is another form of abuse. And if the how does a 10-year-old child give birth? 10 years. It means that this child actually fell pregnant when she was 9. 9. How is that? The child, she's rocking a baby. She's still a child. She still needs to go mama give her to can I call time? Mutukio one na. And I was saying, Madam Speaker, that I got Kamu when I was 29 years. But I tell you, for the 3 months of Kamu's life, he cried every night. Every night, he cried. So I'm just imagining this 10-year-old child with a child that cries every night. What is she going to do with him? I mean, a newborn baby, a matured woman, the newborn baby scares her to death. So this 10, 11, 12-year-old child, what is she going to do? The focus then is on the child, on the girl child that gave birth, not on the person that made the child fall pregnant, who is a man who actually raped this child. Because sex with a child that is of not consenting age is statutory rape. So we're not even talking about that. We want to fault this child. So now I'm not faulting the child, I'm actually faulting the parent. Where was the parent? Well, when Minister Msaka introduced sex education in school, there was an issue. As a mother, I had an issue until she explained to me and I understood what she was talking about. Because we don't talk to our children. This is what we're telling them. And these kids have Google. There's somebody called Google that our kids are living through. Then all the That's what we're saying. So we are not talking to our children. We've delegated parenthood to the streets, to TV, to Google, to their peers, and give us boy. Then you want to come and say, how come that the child got pregnant? Where were the parents? Where were the parents? So I'm flagging the two issues, the boy child and children's pregnancy. It's no longer teenage pregnancy. This is children's pregnancy. So in fact, if I was a police, if I was minister for the ministry, I was going to arrest the parents. No, go back to go and arrest them. Because it means that people are not trying to abuse someone by not giving them good parental advice. We have to make sure that interventions are done as early as possible. And it starts by society that is talking amongst itself, talking with the children, talking as a community. We have also delegated the fact that we are not going to talk about this child. I said, people mind their own business. When we grew up, because community never shall. To understand that we grew up being very afraid of spending on moving around with boys. So society has left people responsibility of guiding young children. So I am pleading that as we begin to plant the seed and talking about these issues, we must talk about them in our homes, talk about them in schools. In fact, parents must be SGB members. We don't even want to participate in the life of our kids in our schools. We run away from the active parents in our schools. We need to make sure that even in churches, this is where we need the church. Not just praying, but talking and having programs that are going to guide our children. Madam Speaker, maybe we need to also do a collective planning or proactive programs in sorting out these issues that I'm flagging. We will be failing in our duty if we adopt that we are not going to depart from someone. We all know very well what should happen with all of us. And in the city, our programs need to be responding to such. On my way here, I had a discussion with one of the young women in Johannesburg. And she was saying to me, as the MMC for Finance, how does the city's budgetary processes infuse gender budgeting with a particular bias towards women and young women, especially? Then we can include the other sectors of our society. So we need to move towards ensuring that our planning in the city responds to some of these challenges in our communities. The executive mayor, when he was the MMC for Finance, had given social development a capex of 1.5 million that was allocated to shelters that were supposed to be dealing with femicide, including managing gender-based violence. In the new financial year, work will also start on the establishment of a shelter of people who are exposed to GBV and femicide in Orange Farm. Management, I want to build more, so we ought to start with these two and use the lessons that we are learning from them to guarantee progress and roll out in the future. Within social development team, an allocation of 76.2 million for the program is prioritizing the management of displaced members of our communities and the homeless. We all know that part of the reason why some women remain in abusive relationships is because of material conditions. As hard as it is to admit, some choose not having a meal or a roof over their heads at the shelter because they believe the shelters are there for the protection. So the city must protect them through these shelters and rescue them from these situations. In the current financial year, we've also made an allocation of 175 million that should purchase and distribute 500,000 food parcels to those who are in a food secure situations in our city. Again, this method should assist us in dealing with those that are financially deprived. As a city, let us provide them with food packs. Let's give them national sustenance, nutritional sustenance. They will then have the ability to stand up and report cases. They will be able to approach NGOs that could give them temporary shelter. We're planning on other programs, Madam Speaker, that will be enrolled in ensuring that we help government in dealing with gender-based violence implications. Madam Speaker, we need to determine as we move forward as a city, how as civil society driven initiatives in the academia as well as the business world devise a citywide specific model. This model won't be easy, but we don't need to have enough money, but the goodwill, the commitment, and the love of working with these vulnerable communities need to make sure that we deal and we confront the second pandemic. And working with NGOs, we see that there are good strides that are going there. As I conclude, Madam Speaker, a Chinese proverb reminds us, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So I am calling on all of us. Let us work at ensuring that our communities cushion and protect vulnerable women and the girl child, including working together to develop this new man that will be a loving, caring, a man that protects their sister and their mothers. I thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, MMC. Ladies and gentlemen, please be reminded that we are streaming live on various platforms. We are at the City of Johannesburg's Facebook page. We are also on the speaker's page, which is at Nonza Bamulwele, which is Facebook. So thank you very much, MMC. We really appreciate that input. I'm going to try and move the program along as fast as we possibly can in the interest of time. Perhaps just to say that I was particularly moved by MMC because many times when we talk about gender-based violence on these platforms, we tend to have theorized discussions and we talk policy, we talk strategy, we talk statistics, which is the correct thing to do. So I love that MMC made practical examples on the issues of gender-based violence, and we will be moving in that breath going forward, but just a little bit later, I will be calling Ms. Disele May, who is going to talk about her experience. But before I do that, let me please call upon Ms. Lisa Dayton, who is a researcher and a project consultant in the Faculty of Humanities at the University of Johannesburg, as well as BEDS. And Ms. Dayton is going to unpack the statistics of gender-based violence in Gauteng and what strategic programs can be introduced to tackle gender-based violence. Ms. Dayton is online. I hope we can get her to please open her video, and if she can maybe unmute herself and address us. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak to you today. I mean, the MMC was talking about NGO programs and what academia can contribute. So I'm hoping in my presentation that I can do that. So I just want to ask the host administrators if they're able to share my presentation with you, if you're able to put it up, or would you like me to share it on my side? Okay, I'm going to try and share it from my side. Can you see the presentation at all?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. So let me just start that. So just to begin with, because we are in the city of Johannesburg, I want to focus specifically on what it is and where we could be focusing. Oh, now you just got a black screen. What is happening here? All right. So because we are in the city of Johannesburg, I want to try and focus on where in Johannesburg we should be focusing and what it is in Johannesburg that we can be doing. So where I want to start, okay, I don't know if you can see this. is if we look at the police statistics, they do start to give us a sense of where, if you wanted, as the city of Johannesburg, to focus, where you might want to think about where to put your energies. So having gone through the police statistics for 2019-20 or 2020-21, I've used those because they are the most recent full year statistics. What we have is more their quarterly statistics. So I've looked at a comparison over roughly the last 10 years. And if we look at the top 30 stations nationally, we can see that there are 4 stations in Johannesburg, in the city of Johannesburg, where it's possible that the city may want to focus. And you can see there's Dobsonville, Morocco, Diepsloot, and Alexandra are stations that are recording amongst the 30 highest rates of rape in the country. But I think Diepsloot is obviously of particular interest because while the other 3 stations are showing something of a decrease, Diepsloot is showing an increase. And partly that has to do with the fact there was a police station built in Diepsloot or opened up in 2011-12. So that's part of the reason for the increase, is that people no longer had to travel to Douglasdale in order to report. But we can see that over the last decade, that's one area that has seen quite a significant increase. So clearly, if the city of Johannesburg is wanting to focus on a particular area where it should be putting energy, where it should be trying to understand where the problems are severe and where they should be introducing programs, then Diepsloot would be a very important place to start, along with Alexandra, which is right next door, as well as Dobsonville and Morocco. So that tells us a little bit about where you might want to focus and put your energies, but it doesn't necessarily tell you about what you should be doing. So I'm going to want to look a little bit at some research programs, especially because the previous speaker, the MMC, focused on them, which is on behavior change programs. And I think why I want to focus on them, because some of the research is telling us that behavior change programs for men are not that easy, and that there's more to trying to change men's behavior than simply a conversation or a dialogue. And I want to draw here from a program that was run in Diepsloot, that was run by Sonke Gender Justice. They'd also run it in Bushbuckridge.
My apologies. I apologize to pause you there. Can I ask you to mute and unmute, because there are some of our guests who are online who say they can't hear you.
Okay. Okay, I'm back on. Is that any better? Ooh.
Okay.
Shall I mute again?
Okay, let's give it a shot and let's see how it goes. Thanks. You can continue where you left off.
Okay. So now that we know a little bit about where we might want to focus and put in extra effort to address violence, what is it that we should do? And so there's been a lot of focus. Previous speaker spoke about it. It's something we hear constantly about the need to have conversations and dialogues with men. But I'd like us to think a little bit more carefully about how we do that. And why I'm saying this is I want to draw here from some research that was done on a program in Diepsloot by Sonke Gender Justice. It was their change program, which had also run in Bushbuckridge in Mpumalanga, and it had shown some problems in changing men's attitudes, which suggests that it could have had effect in Diepsloot, where there is clearly a problem. And why Sonke's program is interesting is because it was studied very carefully. They ran their intervention in some parts of Diepsloot, and they measured how attitudes changed where they ran their program with parts of Diepsloot where they didn't run their program. And there are 2 things that I think their program tells us we need to think very carefully about. Firstly, is that we have no programs that show any success in reducing the rate of men who rape women who are not their partners. So stranger rapes. No one seems to have shown any success in being able to reduce that. But where we are seeing some successes is predominantly in programs that try to address men's relationships with their female partners, which is what the change intervention tried to do. But it raised some very interesting questions for us to think about and to think further about. And that's what it suggests is that possibly the less violent men who they worked with may have reduced their violence, but we're not entirely sure. But what is more concerning is that it suggested that it may have resulted in the more violent men increasing their use of violence. So what this is telling us is that having conversations, having dialogues, and having workshops is not enough. We can't think that that's going to be sufficient in order to change men. I think that we need to think a little bit more about why it is that men use violence, and look a little bit at what we know about men who do use violence. And this particular program is useful because it tells us a little bit about those men who were using violence, and a lot of violence in Dipset, and told us a couple of things. Firstly, is that there were men who themselves had often come from very violent experiences in childhood. They'd been exposed to abuse themselves, both observing their mothers and themselves. So clearly there's a great need to look at how do we assist children who are observing domestic violence. Having a conversation when they are in their 20s is too late. We need to be intervening in domestic violence much earlier, and looking at what happens to children who are exposed to domestic violence. One of the consequences of that exposure was that many of the men who were extremely violent also reported very high levels of depression and anxiety, which suggests that we also need to be looking and putting in place programs that address men's mental health. So I'm very pleased to see that Councillor Mqine is here, because this is clearly an important area for health and social development programs in the city to focus on, is how do we address the problems of men's mental health. The other thing this research was telling us was that a number of the men who were very violent were also men who had gone hungry, and were going hungry on a regular basis, at least once a week. So the food parcel program sounds like it could be important, but we must also look at things like what role hunger might be playing in reducing people's capacity, and men's capacity in particular, to not behave impulsively and to not lash out angrily. So that's telling us about some of the other things we need to, in addition to addressing norms and changing gendered attitudes towards women. But the other thing that's really important that seems to be coming out of this is looking at these questions of housing, of looking at questions of community stability, of looking at violence generally. Because I think one of the things we have to take into account is that Dipset doesn't just have problems of violence towards women, it has problems of violence towards men, to children, to the community, in fact. So what we may need to be doing is looking at how do we address a violent context? How do we get men to shift not only their violent behavior towards women, but their violence towards each other? How do we de-link masculinity from violence? So that's another challenge for us to be thinking about. What are the other aspects of programs that we need to be thinking about? And also, how do we do something about social and community cohesion? Because some of the other things that they identified that may be playing a role in a place like Dipset is the fact that it's a community that's not very stable. It's a place where people might be coming in from other provinces to stay on a temporary basis before they find jobs and opportunities in other parts of the provinces and move on. So there's a lack of social cohesion. So it's also important then for us to look at how do we build social cohesion and solidarity in communities, especially where that's very low. So those, I think, are some of the more complex things that we need to be doing in addition to behavior change if we want to try and reduce violence, because the program that was run in Dipset is telling us that gendered norms don't just come out of a vacuum. They're shaped in very particular kinds of contexts, and those contexts are informed by levels of violence generally, by poor social conditions, by lack of access to social services that address depression, anxiety, for example, children's exposure to violence. So we need to put all those things in place. We can't just focus on the question of norms. In the next part of the presentation, I want to look at some very innovative and interesting programs that have been developed by the Masipepe project. And here I want to focus specifically on a project that was undertaken by ADAPT in Alexandra around looking at these questions of social context and social environment. It's not only ADAPT who's used this, it's also Soul City, and they've been using this particular approach in eThekwini, specifically in KwaMashu. But because we're focusing on City of Johannesburg, I'm going to focus predominantly on ADAPT's work in Alexandra. Okay, so now the screen is frozen. Let's see if we can, okay, there we go. So what I want to talk about here is safety audits. And these are done on an app called Safety Pin, which you can actually download from Google's Play Store and use yourself. But here Safety Pin is being used, and community volunteers from ADAPT are specifically trained to be able to go through different parts of Alex and to assess how safe it was. And these were audits conducted by community volunteers, predominantly women, who looked at how safe they felt. And the different dimensions that they were using in order to audit Alexandra in relation to the app was looking at lighting. So how much lighting is available, and some of these audits were done at night. So, you know, when women have to walk around at night, is there lighting available that keeps the area safe, that has eyes who are looking at the streets and who are observing what is going on? They're also looking at walk paths. Is there space to walk, or are people expected to walk in the roads, or are there no walkways and so they have to go through dark and unlit areas? How open are places? Can you see what's around you? With that visibility, can people see you when you're walking, when you're going through a park, when you're going here, when you're going there? Because obviously the more visible and open a place is, the safer it is, because people can see what's going on. Also, public transport. How accessible is that? Or do you have to walk through long, dark, unlit areas before you get to public transport? When you get to public transport, is it open and visible? Can people see what's happening there? Do they feel safe? Are there police? When you walk, do you see police? Are there regularly police officers passing by which helps you feel safe? What about people? Are places deserted for most of the day? Are there people around who could help intervene or act as bystanders if there is something that happens? And lastly, when we look at public spaces and the movement around them, are there public spaces that you can see women and children are there? Because if you can see women and children in a space, it tells that they feel comfortable and welcome in a public space. If they're not there, then that tells you that that's not a space that is welcoming of women and children for a whole range of reasons. So when they did their safety audits, these are the different dimensions that they went through Alex to look at in order to assess how safe they might feel in Alex. So I'll just give you some examples of the audit. I think it would be really good for the city of Johannesburg to engage with Masipepe Network and Soul City to go into this in more detail, because there's lots of really interesting and rich information here. I just want to give you a snapshot because obviously you have many other speakers and a whole range of other issues to address. So I just want to give you some snapshots of what the audit can do. So you'll see in the one slide with the red box highlighted, this was a night audit, and you can see what they've highlighted there are streetlights that are not working. So that is not a particularly safe place for you to walk. There's light there because there's oncoming traffic, but if you're walking then there's no oncoming traffic, there's no light, people can't see what's going on. The other picture on what would be my right, shows that there's lighting on one side of the road, but not on the other side of the road. So also other questions of safety. Here you can see how the app has translated into information where they've taken Alex, geolocated and geotagged it and talked about where people don't feel very safe. So here, this was one of the volunteers talking about at this bridge between 18th Street, John Brandt and West Bank Cemetery, hotspot for crime. Disturbing crimes occur in this bridge and especially across the cemetery. There's no lighting and there's no security. It's an area where there are young men who are, according to the volunteer, who are doing drugs there and making it easy them to spot on income residents and to target them. And there's also, they're mentioning a park where children are playing. There's no fencing. And so park is right close to the Yukske River. Children can fall in. In fact, victims get thrown into the river and there's nobody there to observe what is going on. And here is somebody else also commenting on the bridge. Again, the lack of security and that there have been both robberies and rapes and attempted murders in the area. So the strength of Safety Pin is that it's a way in which community volunteers can audit and tell you about where action needs to be taken to make an area not only safer, but to feel safer. Because one of the issues that the audit highlighted was that in the areas they went, there were 25%, so a quarter of the places they went to in Alex, there were no women or children to be seen. So that also tells you something about what could be done in order to make an area more welcoming and safer. So these are two very practical examples that I want to present to the city to be thinking about as to practical steps they can be taking in order to make an area safer and to help intervene and reduce our rates of gender violence. So just in conclusion, I've talked a little bit about the safety audits, what that implies for making sure that there's street lighting, that there's visibility, that there's safe places to walk. But there are other things that I want to build on as well, just to leave you to think about as ideas and possible strategies to take forward at local government level. Because I think your role has really been neglected in terms of what it is you could be doing. So the previous speaker mentioned shelters. So we already have a number of shelters in existence in different parts of the city. And I think a very important role to be playing for local government is they frequently give shelters they register them, give them health and safety certificates and say whether or not they're safe to be used. Sometimes this process can take a very long time. So I think there's a very important role for the city to be playing in terms of how they could be liaising with existing shelters in the area, but how they could help address the health and safety audits that need to be done to ensure that residences are safe and that shelters can be registered and made available. A second area for local government to do is to be looking at housing, especially in relation to rental stock. So where the city has rental stock and rental units, how could they link up with shelters? Because women can't live in shelters forever. They need to move on after a while to be able to get on with their lives. And they often need access to affordable, low rent places to stay. So there is an important gap, I think, for the city to be playing in terms of how they could link up with shelters in terms of thinking about how could their rental units be made available to women. And here they could partner with a shelter in terms of what kind of criteria they could be developing. So for instance, it could be looking at somebody who is in a shelter, needs to move on, has counseling support. How does the city then link so that they can use those criteria in order to be able to assist women to move on to the next phase of her life and have access to affordable rental units? So that could be the role that housing could also be playing. And I think if you look at the Metro Police have an important role to play in enforcing the Domestic Violence Act. They've been overlooked. I think there's a lot of emphasis on what the police can do, but the Domestic Violence Act makes it very clear that the Metro Police can be involved in domestic violence. They have duties. They can be called out to homes. They can be providing information. They can be taking women to shelters and providing them with counseling services. So the challenge I open to the City of Johannesburg is, what kind of training have you been offering to your Metro Police officers? How are you making it known that they are available to assist and support? Do they have links to shelters? Do they know what the counseling services are? Can they be playing that role? Then I think if you look from the role of Metro Police, I think there's also the city's emergency medical services and community clinics. And this could be such an important role to be playing. Traditionally, the health sector hasn't played the kind of role in domestic violence that it could. And we're seeing with the Domestic Violence Act, the amendments to it now are going to place new duties on healthcare workers to be identifying and to be referring where there are cases of domestic violence, to be able to be giving referrals to shelters and counseling services. So it'd be really good if the city anticipates what's coming and starts to think how they could build this into the work of emergency medical services and community clinics. So your paramedics, for example, they may often be called out to situations where women are injured and need to be taken to hospital after possibly being assaulted by their partners. Are they perhaps asking women who assaulted them? Are they helping put them into contact with shelters? There's an important role that paramedics could be playing. The same goes with your community clinics, whether it's family planning at a whole range. How could they potentially be trained to be, in a very sensitive and supportive way, to be asking women how they are doing at home? Do they have contact to their local shelters? Do they know their counseling services? What can they be doing? So there's a really important role that the city could be playing in terms of training and preparing their health services from emergency to community clinics to being able to intervene and direct in relation to domestic violence. And then lastly, I've given you the examples of the safety audits. So I think there are interesting questions here around to what extent could the city link up with groupings like ADAPT, Masipepe and Soul City around doing these audits in more parts of the city. But more importantly, now that this information is available about places that are safe or unsafe, what is it that the city can do in order to act on that information? How can they, when they see that if a safety audit highlights that streetlights are not functioning, that there are no security guards, that fencing has collapsed, and transport areas are not safe, how do they then link up with communities in order to be able to do something about that? So I want to bring my presentation to a conclusion there, because there is a really significant and I think underappreciated role for local government to play. And so I'd like to leave you with these thoughts, as to where you could be going to build on some of the things that the MMC has already raised as possibilities that you could be doing. I'm going to stop there, and thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Ladies and gentlemen, we have heard the stats. We've seen the research, it speaks for itself. Thank you, Lisa, for some of the inputs on the programs to be looked into as a social collective. I will now call on a lady who is a gender and social activist. She's also a gender-based violence coordinator, and she's also the survivor of gender-based violence. She'll be sharing with us her powerful and inspiring story today. But as I call upon her, please be advised that I will now hand the program over to Councillor Sesi Dinyane. He was actually initially meant to be the director of this program, but unfortunately he was running late. So I'm going to hand it back to him. He's the ward councillor of this particular ward, Ward 21. So on that note, thank you very much. Ms. Diseleme, over to you.
Sandra, in every irritation, there's an invitation to elevation. I was married to a prison warder at the age of 22, and I was unemployed. And we stayed in Johannesburg prison for the period of 10 years. And that's when I interacted with offenders, because I would visit the saloon to go and do my dreadlocks, which female offenders would do it. And at home, they would come and do maintenance. As you know, that correctional service doesn't utilize contractors like other department to do the maintenance. And that's how I discovered how skilled inmates work. After 7 years in my marriage, I started at the Ministry Department of Health. Abuse started when I started working. And the fact that I was no longer a full-time housewife created a bit of insecurities in my marriage and led my ex-husband to become obsessive, and the obsession led to physical abuse. When abuse became severe, I took legal action by opening cases at the police station. Police came yes to arrest him, but when we were at the police station, he begged me to withdraw the cases because he was the only sole provider providing for me and my children. I withdrew the case and I stayed at home, but I opened a protection order for him. But he continued to physically abuse me. One day he came back from home drunk around 2 a.m. and started physically abusing me, assaulting me, strangling me in front of my daughter who was 16 years old then. Screaming that if I think I'm beautiful and I'm smart, he's going to kill me and I'll follow my late friend who was killed months prior by his best friend who was also a prison guard. On that night, that's when I got injured. I hit the glass door with my right hand trying to escape and cut the main tendon, leaving my right hand permanently disabled. I did 3 operations, tendon don't recover. Since then, I'm living with the pain until I die. He asked forgiveness and I stayed again. After a month, he assaulted me again by pushing my head towards the floor and I fell, leaving my front teeth shaking from the roots. And this is my last one. It was on the 9th of August 2007 when I had to run to the local place of safety for protection. Shelter don't give victims, don't keep victims for too long. They allow us to stay there for only 3 months. I had to find a place, another place to stay. I didn't want to go back home. Not because it was a shack, not because I was ashamed of the stigma from the neighbors, but because I was staying with my unemployed mother and it was not safe for me. And he was too disrespectful towards her, but I had no choice but went back home.
He continued to stalk me and threaten me until one day I finally divorced him. I became bitter towards men. I hated men, and I took out my frustration on my Facebook page by saying how I felt about me. After a few years, my entrepreneur journey as a woman in construction started. I wanted to be independent so bad. My first project, I struggled with skilled workers, and I remember the offenders' beautiful work and posted on my Facebook that I would like to give them a second chance. One day, a gentleman reached out to me by the name of Chief Mokhele, who changed my life on that day. It was all started by him asking me for contact details, and then he sent me a message requesting my email address. Shortly after, I received an email from Bloomberg Correctional Services, offender inviting me to come and celebrate my 40th birthday by honoring me with one day soccer tournament. On the day, seeing a lot of men incarcerated, leaving all the same kids without fathers or male figures to guide them about social issues. I met offenders who were studying gender-based violence, who were studying gender-based courses, including the guy who reached out to me. That's when the journey started, and I got to realize that these people didn't know me, but they understood how I felt as a battered woman and wanted to make a change. It was the same day that I took a drastic decision to make a drastic move to work with them and make a difference. I gave my abuse background speech, and that I was forgiven. I've forgiven my perpetrator and those who have hurt me, so that I can walk in it. They applaud me, roaring with the masculine voices. I could see the joy in their eyes that a battered woman is going to give them, those who have changed their behavior, a second chance to help them reintegrate with the community. On the day, the head of Media and Peace Section, Mr. Hobo, offered to partner with me on the annual campaign against women and child abuse. I came up with programs of profiling offenders, family intervention, and activities that integrate the awareness campaign against women and children abuse, such as soccer tournament, artist band, writing books, visual arts, etc. These activities were created to allow them to focus on change behavior and changing their mindset. The Seleme Foundation was then registered in 2017, 4 years after this project was implemented. Offenders that want to make changes in their life and stop participating on wrongdoing such as gaslighting and child abuse, they take rehabilitation of their soft skills classes in partnership with correctional service on behavior change and gender equality. Due to the impact of COVID-19 on global poverty, I've partnered with the offenders to give back with the hard skills by manufacturing school uniform for vulnerable school children and planting vegetable on their greenhouses to give back to the shelters and orphanages. This prepares them for a better future when they are released to prevent recidivism, which is reoffending, and stigma, and become a menace to society. I piloted the program to some other Gauteng prisons that welcomed the ideas with open hands and allowed me to partner with them on rehabilitation programs. We need the same system implemented, Madam Speaker, outside prison in order to prevent the system from failing our voice and girls. As I moved towards my stability, I started to help other women who are victims and survivors of gender-based violence with the support that I never had. I'm now advocating for disadvantaged shelters and help women and children at orphanages to help them to heal by also introducing the same soft skills of behavior change and gender equality and hard skills. For example, sewing, baking, train the trainer to acquire skills to sustain themselves, preventing them not to go back to what have broken them. I'm currently working on a new program that allows victims of gender-based violence, whether physical or emotional, to help them heal from the wound and to gain back their confidence. This stemmed from the loss of my truth last year, which affected my confidence and my speech. We would like to partner with health department and have doctors, surgeons, psychologists, plastic surgeons, dietitians, and neurosurgeons, because no human being is supposed to live with the pain and the stigma. We also want to partner with pro bono lawyers to assist our GP victims with legal issues. I've piloted a youth initiative desk for youth to take up their space and take stand against gender-based violence. by coming up with the programs that campaigns against GBV and femicide, including the acts of prayer to encourage youth to not partake in illegal activities. I intend to pilot this program of soft skills and hard skills in creation of youth employment. It was a man who abused me. It was also a man who changed my mindset, who came to my rescue and made me the woman that I am today. The previously incarcerated have joined our movement to help fight the escalating stage of GBV and the femicide using modus operandi. I have you use a thief to catch a thief. I have sent partnership proposal to the Department of Community Safety to allow probably to give back by joining police forum in the local areas. We have made it a tradition at DMF to celebrate Women's Month by visiting shelters of abused women and children, encouraging them in donating food parcel, toiletry, and clothes. We need to raise more awareness. We need a mentally fit man. We need changed behavior men. We need long-term sustainable projects, not just talk, to help us fight the escalating stage of GBV, domestic violence and femicide. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good day, colleagues. The Speaker of the City of Johannesburg, the Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, the councillors, community members, of course, non-Tlaganipo Nizambe. I've been struggling to really pronounce this surname. I've been practicing just behind the curtains. So finally, I hope when I go back behind these curtains, I'll not be properly clobbered by the non-Tlaganipo here. Look, we are really inspired. The input given here by the previous speakers. We thank you very much. But I must say, the activist, Ms. Disele, you really made some of us behind her to be very emotional. It was a very emotional, address, a very emotional experience. And you ask yourself, if really ourselves as men who would have claimed to be responsible men, a future husband, how do you feel when you actually deal with such an important person in our lives? I think this initiative, Speaker, in this month of Women Month, it's important that we don't stop, but we ensure that we push so that we change this, mindset and ultimately get it right to make sure that we have a proper community out there. So indeed, it was a very touching, but yet a very powerful. We hope as you move, sisters, you become very strong and you make sure that you encourage even those that are still scared to come forward and really share the experience. There are many out there. So it's always important to touch their soul, to touch their lives, so that at the end of the day, they actually come out and ultimately get necessary support and help that they actually desire. And we hope with the partnership from the city of Johannesburg, we'll make sure that at least moving forward, you actually get the support to try to change and assist the society. With those words, allow me to actually take to our next speaker, would address or talk to us on what is the city strategy on gender-based violence. And also what has the city done so far to deal with the scales of gender-based violence. And indeed, the next speaker would be the MMC of Health and Social Development, Ms. Eunice Ntrina. On my program here and looking at the time, of course, given 5 minutes, I'm not sure whether you'll be in a position to really manage with that 5 minutes. But yeah, and I'm told that you're online. I hope you are ready. Oh, perfect. MMC Ntrina is not me. With this time, I don't know. It's Fiso when they will tell us why this 5 minutes. But I want to hand it over to you so that you take us through. Over to you, MMC.
No, thank you, Councillor. Am I audible? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, program directors, Mrs. Nedzamba and Councillor Sesedinyane, the Honorable Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Mr. Tsenodi. I think I'm with you as well in another session, hence I'm connecting online. You were connecting online in the session that I'm at, and it's now vice versa. I'm connecting online, and you are actually physically there in Soweto. Let me also acknowledge the Honorable Speaker of the City of Johannesburg, Councillor Nongceba Mlwele, the representatives from the UN Women's Desk. I saw Ms. Hazel Gooden, who's with us here today. Let me also acknowledge from the same desk, Ms. N. Hituku Shongwe, as well as Mr. Mkolisi. Acknowledge the gender-based violence survivor and activist who just shared a very depressing story, Ms. Disele May, the researcher and project consultant in the Faculty of Humanities at Wits University, Ms. Lisa Vayton, the MMC for Finance, Councillor Tsidi Mfuikwe, MMC Economic Development, Councillor Thomas Mfukengi. I think I must say that both of them, they're new from the box. You acknowledged my fellow MMCs, councillors who might have joined us. I think I've seen a few councillors who have joined us as well. You acknowledge fellow councillors, members of the NGO sector who might also have joined us this afternoon, residents of this great city of Johannesburg, our officials, ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon to you all. I think, Madam Speaker, under a normal circumstance, I would have said it gives me a great pleasure to be part of this discussion. But because we live in an absolutely abnormal times, it is with a heavy heart that I participate in yet another platform in which we discuss the ongoing attacks on women, young and old, in a shameful phenomenon that continues to grip our country, the phenomenon of gender-based violence and femicide. Program directors, I am particularly saddened by the fact that we meet only a few days after the discovery of the remains of Nostelo Ntebeni, whose lifeless limbs were found in rubbish bags, and strewn in the streets in Guinea, in the Eastern Cape. This after she was allegedly killed by the so-called boyfriend. We also met we meet a few days after the body of a 30-year-old Balisa Maruping was also found hanging from the ceiling of a house not far from her home in Kuma location in Stilfontein in the Northwest Province. Who can forget the date of the 24th of August 2019 when the body of a 19-year-old Uyinene Mkhwetyana was found in a post office after she was raped and killed by a male post office worker in Claremont in the Western Cape. These are but a few of these cases that have grabbed the headlines. And I know that, Madam Speaker, there are many more incidents of gender-based violence that are ongoing as we speak, particularly in our doorstep here in Johannesburg. During this month, which we are meant to celebrate women and women's achievement, and to pay tribute, honestly, to the heroines, women emancipation, like the late Umama Charlotte Maxeke. But here we are, Madam Speaker, in the grips of one of the strangest phenomenon of our times, which the president has referred to as a second pandemic. As part of these discussions today, Madam Speaker, I've been asked to share with you the city strategy on gender-based violence and what the city has done in efforts to eradicate this scourge. And I think Ms. Vetten has touched on a number of things that we need to do as a city in order for us to fight this scourge. As a city of Johannesburg, our draft strategic framework on gender-based violence seeks to address the needs and challenges faced by all, especially women across the age, sexual orientation, sexual and gender identities, and specific groups such as the elderly women, women who live with disability, migrant women, as well as trans women who are affected and impacted by gender-based violence. This draft strategic framework, Madam Speaker, which we are ready, of course, to present to Council, I think, tomorrow for ratification, is informed by a number of guiding principles from a broader-based national government initiatives by international standards with respect to gender-based violence and women empowerment. This framework, Madam Speaker, has been developed and is being proposed because existing COJ strategies and initiatives related to women empowerment often do not specifically include a gender-based violence and femicide focus. When gender-based violence and femicide is mentioned or included program directors, it is often in a tangential way, and it's not fully integrated. The framework will ensure that gender-based violence and femicide concerns are addressed throughout the city, of course, and in other initiatives such as the municipal-owned entities and their strategies. Because we have realized that survivors of gender-based violence have continued to face the secondary trauma which prevents them from fully accessing the necessary support and justice. As an additional violation of their human dignity, the city has established a 24-hour gender-based violence and substance abuse crisis line. The crisis line is assisting our response in terms of medical case, management, and psychosocial support. It is also to assist with safety, security, mental health, access to justice, rule of law, and coordination for victims of substance abuse and gender-based violence. And I must say that we receive calls as far as Limpopo, as far as the Western Cape, as far as KwaZulu-Natal. So there's a need indeed to really have such crisis lines in all our provinces as well, and municipalities, of course. We also have formalized a partnership with Lawyers Against Abuse. This is a non-profit organization that works on strengthening the justice system response to gender-based violence by providing legal services and therapy to victims, engaging with state actors and empowering communities. In 2014, the Lawyers Against Violence established a walk-in center in Dipslot, that is in Region A in our space, and to date, it has provided a critical legal service and therapeutic services to over 1.5 victims, 1,500 victims of gender-based violence, develop strong relationships with local police and courts officials, and engage over 50,000 community members through outreach initiatives. The very same Lawyers Against Violence is currently finalizing its plan to open a satellite center in Orange Farm, staffed, of course, with 2 legal practitioners who will provide specialized legal services to gender-based victims and work to strengthen the response of gender justice system to gender-based violence. As the city program directors, we will be providing a space for legal and practitioners as part of our partnership with the lawyers. Given the dire situation of gender-based violence and femicide and violence against children, of course, the city is in the process of establishing the gender-based violence shelter that can provide or will provide temporary accommodation to abused mothers and their children. And it's what MMC Mfika was saying earlier on. The shelter will include a skills development center, which will be used for training, of course, and meetings, a computer lab, as well as a sewing room, and rooftop gardens to also promote urban agriculture. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, we have also conducted an analysis of a gender-based violence, which considered the structural violence that contributes to the macro level patterns of oppression and exploitation, which results in gender-based violence in the city. Our analysis, of course, supported by various research studies, revealed that harmful social and gender norms, unbalanced power relations, low education, poverty, and conflict of all either root causes or accentuate the risk of gender-based violence in our society. Once viewed as a private matter, gender-based violence is now a matter of public health and global concern. Our interventions involves an increased awareness, which should also lead to significant changes in the city's legal framework on gender-based violence. Awareness campaigns include engagements with community-based structures such as men, women's forum, religious and structural cultural formations, as well as relevant NGOs that we have partnered with in the city, and those that will still have to partner with in the city. These forums are dealing with barriers facing diverse groups such as women and girls, young women, LGBTQI+, and non-conforming persons, newcomer and migrant women and children, as well as women and girls with disabilities. Working together with Joburg Theatre, we have just commenced with a mobile theatre truck activation as part of our awareness campaigns on gender-based violence and femicide until the COVID-19 regulations were amended and posed a serious challenge to our continue with the implementation. As part of our mass media campaign, we are also contemplating on utilizing other platforms such as hashtags, stickers on public transport, your taxis and taxi ranks, your Via buses, the city's properties, metro buses, our parks, etc., as well as pamphlets to spread the message against gender-based violence. Madam Speaker, together with Masiko, Clement, and Boys Forum, we have also introduced special programs which are focusing on targeting men, including young men. I think fellow panelists spoke a lot around this, and ex-perpetrators of gender-based violence as part of continuous rehabilitation and prevention. This program includes men's dialogues and constant engagements where issues such as emotional violence and other forms of unconscious biasness against women are actually discussed. Plans are in motion to take these engagements to the hostels as well around the city. And we hope that we won't have challenges when this particular engagements, when we start to engage our fellow men who reside in our hostels around our city. In our quest to strengthen existing structures and promoting accountability, the city is in the process of finalizing and establishing of the COJ, in fact, gender-based violence and femicide advisory committee, which is something that we're working on. And this committee will be made up of members across government, society, that is strategically response to gender-based violence with a clear messaging and adequate technical and financial resources. I can safely report that the terms of reference for the very same establishment of this committee have been drafted and approved with a considerable number of experts already identified and appointed. We will be launching the committee in due course. The intention is to launch, of course, Madam Speaker, this particular committee before the month of August ends. Madam Speaker, it will have been a futile exercise to implement all the above programs without the creation of a more economic opportunities for women, as outlined in one of the pillars of the National Strategic Plan of Gender-Based Violence. As we are all aware, women are often held hostages in abusive relationships because of poverty and unemployment. Economic opportunities increase women's earnings and bargaining power, raise household incomes, reduces poverty, and promotes more gender equality within and beyond the household. As part of our programs, Madam Speaker, aimed at curbing the spread of gender-based violence in the city of Johannesburg, the department is proposing that the city's budget, MMC, should be structured in a manner that ensures that all departments and municipal entities award a certain percentage of their procurement as well as employment to women, as per the approved policies that we have. We further propose that the expanded public works program, the EPWP, train and hire women to provide community psychosocial support services, amongst others. As the MMC assigned to drive the GLU, the GLU Government of Local Unity Priority Program to combat gender-based violence and femicide, I am delighted to indicate that Council is ready to consider and approve our draft gender policy, which was reviewed through an extensive public participation process between October and December 2020. The mainstreaming of gender budgeting is a central thrust to the profound policy, which seeks to elevate and place gender issues at the highest level in this great city of ours. Madam Speaker, ladies and gentlemen, let me conclude by indicating that despite the difficulties presented to us by COVID-19 in interacting with our communities, we remain resolute and committed to find ways to implement our programs, of course, that are aimed at eradicating gender-based violence and violence against our children. Let's continue to observe the protocols of COVID because it's quite important for us to remind ourselves that we really have to observe the protocols of COVID, which includes the non-pharmaceutical interventions of properly wearing a mask, constantly washing our hands, as well with a soap, as well as social distancing. Madam Speaker, let me go back to my seat and thank everyone for being part of this important discussion, and wish everyone to enjoy the rest of the day and wish all our beautiful women, of course, a happy Women's Month. And I hope that we continue to work together with different partners in the city that have shown interest in fighting the scourge of gender-based violence and violence against our children. With those words, program directors, Councillor Sese, I am apologizing honestly for taking your 5 minutes. I hope I've made justice in terms of the 5 minutes that you had requested me to actually present my input. Once more, everyone, thank you very much, and happy Women's Month to everyone, especially our women. Thank you.
MMC, in fact, I was somehow trying to intimidate you, thinking that you would just, stop you right there. No, but thank you very much. Councillor MMC Fikwe, in your input, and I think I was saying, because you are consistent in this, input every time when you've got platform, especially when you talk to issues of this gender-based. You are extremely consistent in saying lento yokuthi indoda ayikhali yabekezela, it doesn't work. You are encouraging that we must cry. And thina sikholwa bathi indoda ayikhali. But the reality is, in every man we are human, and I think I agree with the input you presented. Let me immediately invite the MMC, Thomas Mufuke. Is also online. He would present to us what is the economic impact of gender-based violence in the city of Johannesburg. So I hope you are there, MMC. Can I just see if
I'm here, Program Director.
On my program here, you also have 5 minutes. So I don't know if you'll also manage, but if I come back and then I'll have to switch off here. Now, over to you.
Thank you. I'll only take less than 5 minutes, Program Director. The Speaker of the Deputy Speaker of National Assembly, and Datelichisa Tsenolo, the Executive Mayor of the City of Johannesburg, and Jolie D. Matongo, and the Speaker of the City of the Johannesburg Council, Menoneba Mulwele, members of the Mayoral Committee, and fellow panelists, I greet you all. And I want to thank you for the opportunity of inviting me to this wonderful debate, especially the debate that comes when all of us and the whole country is focusing at women, all the contributions that our beautiful mothers and sisters are doing in the country, and honoring them throughout this month of August. I believe, Madam Speaker, that this topic came just at the right time, because this is the time when we really want to empower the women of our city, the women of our country, despite the fact that they come from whatever background, whether they come from the background of poverty, of the background of wealth, we honor them all, and we just want to say, this is your month, and let's focus mainly on this important issue that is actually disturbing all of us who do not want to see gender-based violence continuing as it is continuing. I was a bit worried to see that, you know, in the city we have our own hotspots of gender-based violence. You know, you name places like Alexander, it appears as one of the hotspots. You look at Ivory Park, it comes second as one of the hotspots. And you look at places like Orange Farm and places like Dobsonville. Now that we know where this problem is existing and where it is strong, I believe it is the role of us in the city to make sure that we work together with those communities, educate them, and make sure that they actually become aware of this giant that we are faced with. And I would like to say, you know, it is also very much worrying to realize that South Africa is ranking as the 4th in the world when it comes to gender-based violence. It cannot be. It is where we live. It is where we have a say. And I must say, Madam Speaker, it is our role as the leaders of the city to make sure that we contribute in squashing this animal that we are faced with, so that our women and our young girls can be part of the economy and contribute positively to the economy of the country. You know, it was also worrying to see that, Madam Speaker, you know, according to KPMG, that almost 50% of women in the country are affected by this disease that has encroached in our homes. So we have to do something about it. But the worst is when you realize that this has got so much negative impact on the city itself, on the economy, because the study shows that gender-based violence cost the country between 28.4 billion rand to 42 billion rand every year when it occurs. So it affects us in many ways, and the country cannot lose so much money, and the economy of the country cannot be affected by this social ill that has to be eradicated and be taken out. You know, I was listening to one of my fellow panelists who is the survivor of this gender-based violence. It is something that cannot be tolerated. And the most important thing, Madam Speaker, that I think must be done, it is for us to go out there and educate the people. It is for the mothers to start talking to the young ones, you know, to the young ladies, to make them aware that there is this problem that the country is facing and how they should actually handle it and how they should also avoid it. Because I think if these people that are perpetrating this violence on our women can be isolated and women can be able to identify them, we will be able to achieve good results. I must also say, Madam Speaker, that, you know, because the economy is being affected by this, the hospitals, you know, people that are affected by this end up not going to work. They end up having low esteem, you know, not to be able to be productive at work not to be able to be productive to the economy of the city. This is something that has to be totally squashed, and we cannot wait longer than this. You know, the restrictions of COVID-19 is also another. It is also another. They contributed to intensify the circumstances of GBV, and one will understand that you know, once the people's movement are restricted, people stay together in the same houses. They stay together in whatever settlements that they have. And this violence start taking place and so on. But I think, again, it is our responsibility to make sure that even if there are restrictions to movements of the people and so on, we must be talking to our law enforcement to be aware that this thing is actually consuming a lot. The courts are busy because of this GBV. And not only the courts, it is also said that many people are avoiding and are even not going to work because they are not, they have challenges or the after effects of GBV. Madam Speaker, having said this, I must say that as a city of Johannesburg, and out of the 24 billion that we lose in the economy because of GBV, Johannesburg has a bigger percentage in that, and we must make sure, and especially us as the Department of Economic Development has to be doing some other things, you know, to work on this. Now, on the positive side, our department is doing wonders when it comes to empowering women. We have what we call opportunity centers. And in those opportunity centers, we have a higher percentage, above 45% of people that are attending this, that are coming to opportunity centers to be assisted are women, and we are grateful about that. And we help them in making sure that those who want to be in business are in business. Those who want to get opportunity or work opportunities or employment opportunities are also being exposed to them as well. So I'm happy that our Directorate of Development of Economic Development has already focused on this, and we really want to make sure that we have to push, even in our own departments, a higher number of women to be in strategic positions, to be in decision-making positions, because we know that women are capable. We know that women, given a chance, can show commitment that they always show, even in their own houses. So having said that, I just want to encourage all women that have been exposed to this disease of GBV, that, you know, they have to go out there and report these things, you know, because in most cases, we feel sympathetic to the perpetrators of this violence. But the truth is, we cannot allow this kind of violence carrying on, because it impacts us negatively, and it impacts the economy of the city negatively, and impact us negatively even in our own homes. So I want to thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity, and I want to encourage all the organizations that are working to empower and to help our women to work even harder and make sure that they succeed in making sure that our women are being helped and assisted in all angles. Thank you so much, Madam Speaker, and thank you so much Program Director. Have a lovely day.
No, definitely spot on. 5 minutes. I will be cheap. The next topic would be understanding the concept of men's parliament and how local government can get involved in the fight against gender-based violence. Our speaker is none other than Mr. Solomon Lichisa, the Deputy Speaker of National Assembly. Over to you.
Councillor says, ke kopa lebitso leo la sekgowa o le tlohele ka hara ID. Otherwise, I won't come to your ward again. Thank you very much, Program Director, Councillor Sese. We are glad to be in your neighborhood. Madam Speaker, I'm really appreciative of the opportunity you have created to continue on the campaign we have been involved in for some time now. I'm glad because also as we were chatting outside, our relationship as legislatures, often people do not think local government as a legislature, when in fact you do bylaws, and those bylaws must be adhered to, including your budget. If it is not complied with, that's breaking the law. So as a legislature, we cooperate. But also, local government is represented in the National Council of Provinces by 10 SALGA members. So in that sense, you constitute part of the work that we are doing. There's no way we can do what we're doing wherever without recognition and collaboration to achieve common objectives. One of those common objectives is the vision of our country to create an unracial, non-sexist, democratic, and prosperous society. And in my language, I hope an egalitarian society. The values that inform the pioneers of what we are engaged in had 3 values, if I may just talk to them. And that is, they had integrity, they had honesty, and humility. And this is why next September, when it ends, the State Capture Commission, we call the Zondo Commission, will provide its final report to tell us how we have departed from fulfilling those values and what they think we must do to get back onto the right track. The question of, let me say this, in conclusion, I will say that to know and not do is not yet to know. To know and not do is not yet to know. This is a Chinese saying, talking about the relationship, the dynamic relationship between theory and practice. So, Madam Speaker, and this is part of the conclusion. When we finish these discussions here and the wonderful insights, however heartbreaking some of them are, what difference are we going to make in our individual capacity on this platform, including in our organizational capacity and the municipality? So that as we approach the elections, either in October or next February, what gets done is based partly on the insights generated from these conversations. So this is my request to all of us individually and collectively to be mindful of the necessity always, as our understanding broadens as a result of the experiences of the many speakers who spoke here and presented to us. It must be reflected in practice, what Lisa was calling a changing behavior. And I want to challenge her and say that it's not a changing behavior only of men, but it is also of women. Patriarchy is buttressed by both men and women, traditionally. And so if we don't go to the roots also of that patriarchy, there are others who it serves, and so they perpetuate it. So we must find, and this is what is interesting happening in the men's forum, as it happens, as men talk about what led us to do these things. What are the explanations for why we are behaving and acting this way? And how can this be solved? Both in our homes, in the workplaces, and the increasing appreciation and understanding of the root causes of the problem is what is leading often to changes that are not noticed elsewhere, but in practice where it matters most, these are registered. So those men who have participated in men's forum in Gauteng, I forgot, Madam Speaker, to alert the chairperson of the men's forum in Gauteng that I'm coming to the city to talk on this, on the issues that he leads in the province. So in a sense, that work is crucial for us to work together with them. I do want to suggest that behind the men's forum, let me put it this way, there's a wisdom from the old. Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will glorify the hunter. When Disile May said it was a man who harmed her, so to speak, but also it was a man who rescued her, I breathed a sigh of relief because I knew I wasn't going to be asked, what on earth am I doing here? Like I was asked in some forum, in some province, I won't mention it, when one woman from the university said, by the way, we thought as women, we wanted to bond. What is that man doing here? Because I think in what she says is an explanation that there is nothing inherently brutal about men and women, if I may say so. It is our socialization. And part of that is what we need to overcome. And this project is intergenerational. Madam Speaker, local government is defined in the law as meaning yourselves as elected representatives, as well as appointed hired officials, administration. And thirdly, the residents in the demarcated jurisdictional area. In other words, inside the Johannesburg city boundaries. Residents there constitute the third element of what a municipal council is. So when we say the council fails or succeeds, we're talking not only about elected representatives, but also officials who are appointed there, acting together with the communities and people in that area. So this is a crucial perspective to have in mind, because it is about children, youth, adults, and the elderly. And what is the extent to it in our evaluation? They have been heard as part of that municipality in order to define what the city does. I'll come back to this. And of course, from a gender point of view, children, youth, adults, and the elderly also have other specifics. They are men, women, boys and girls, MMC in frequent, the LGBTQ community. Then traditionally, historically, our prejudices must be dumped so that we appreciate, as our constitution guides us, that human beings must be treated as human beings, irrespective of how they prefer and choose to define themselves. This is a long-term journey. In other words, what we are doing today must matter in the medium term and in the long term. In 2030, when we have to account for what we have done to put into practice the objectives of the National Development Plan, what will the, what you call the COG, City of Johannesburg? Now, if you don't know what on earth is COG, you are from some village somewhere, you wonder, what on earth are they talking about? So you must go and get a translator for that language here. And this is a critical part that, just to illustrate, I said to a community in Limpopo that you must speak to Mondi, who you are giving a lease to use your land, which you have reclaimed back, to tell you what will they have done in the next 10 years when they are using this land which is yours in your interest. And I suggested, why don't you start them with investing in early childhood, so that in 10 years' time, which is going to be very soon, you must be able to see the quality of children who come through this early childhood facilities, creches, that they have been brought up in a manner consistent with the best values of our constitution and the parents. When we were looking at how local government in South Africa must work post-apartheid, we learned from Brazil a brilliant idea of what they call integrated development plans. That these called integrated meant integrated. But I suspect you're my witness, Madam Speaker, Lweng, that we have not succeeded to have our work integrated properly. In other words, each sector was meant to have a master plan that says in the next 5 years, for example, on questions of men and conditions of men in this city, these are programs that we must put into place so that we must be able to see the difference at the end of 5 years arising from it. They are integrated also because they are affected horizontally inside the city by what each of the other departments are doing: water, rubbish and waste collection and management, etc. How it is done to impact on this is a critical component of that. That's integration horizontally. But it is also integrated vertically. That when the municipality has consulted its community in the manner we suggested earlier on, and they have more or less identified the next steps that should be taken, they need to hear, which is a regulation of, if I'm not wrong, Municipal Finance Management Act, that requires that each department must provide municipalities with an indication of resources to that municipality in the next year, whenever budgets are passed and so on. So that when the municipality finalizes its budget by June, July, they have an indication of what their own resources are saying to do that and how much comes from the national, provincial, and national, so to speak. Now, I'm raising this because oversight requires of us to be asking this question, whether it is happening, and if it is not happening, why is it not happening? So the conditions of men, you can say of children in the city, will not change unless compliance with that requirement in the planning process is adhered to. When we wrote the Constitution, and as a result of that, we passed laws. Some of the comments that Lisa is making arising from an evaluation of legislation that suggests that if you did that and followed through to ensure that what is in the law gets done, and if it's not done, there is a satisfactory explanation why it was not done and how soon will that be corrected. It would make a huge difference in our legislature, Madam Speaker, at the metropolitan level, similarly at the provincial level and national level. The reason, as the Speakers Forum National, we commissioned the high-level panel to evaluate laws and why they did not make an impact that it was expected, was partly because we realized that we spent time making laws and not enough to evaluate the impact they were intended to. And one of those pieces of legislation was the equality legislation, as contained in the Constitution, and in a sense, making reference to human beings as equal in our country. Failure to do that has also meant that we are in trouble with implementation. The patriarchy I referred to and socialization that keeps it alive arises from assumptions of superiority of men over women. It coincides with the class divisions in society, that women are paid less than men. The same idea that is reinforced by socialization. And so, in other words, fighting the distinction between men and women and their roles in the problems we're confronting partly also serves the interests of others who want to make the biggest amount of money and give the least amount of money to women. So this is why it is important to go to the roots of the problem, so that we dig to see what keeps these differences alive. Because if we don't do that, if we don't go to the roots, this thing will simply mutate into different, what do you call these things, the COVID? Different variants, sorry? Variants, yes. If you don't deal with the roots of the thing, but the point I'm making about it is that it is up. This is what is growing in the forums that are held. I know we have had this from women who have met frequently. Their understanding of the roots of the problem has deepened. Similarly, men too, going through meetings to examine what lies behind what they are doing, what lies behind their violence. It is partly an intergenerational story that comes from back. The colonial and apartheid violence that characterize society continues. And by the way, even amongst the well-to-do, there's an assumption that the poor, unemployed are the ones who are even more violent. You look at women who come from well-to-do families across the board, trying to use makeup and sunglasses to hide the violence meted on them. The stories that arises from there are horrific. So this violence is multiple it's got many dimensions which must be understood. So in the way in which we campaign against it, we must be alive and alert to those dimensions. As I close, Madam Speaker, I do want to draw on and say to MMC in Fikwe that her reference to the story of boys. Fortunately, the former chairperson of Commission on Gender Equality, Vanuzel, shows participated in a meeting convened by Men Engaged, which is an international body of men supported by UN Women and by the Indian government. And basically a declaration that came out of there called Men and Boys for Gender Justice, problematizes and goes to where you are going to. The recognition, just as we argue that patriarchal tendencies are reinforced by both men and women, of course, the violence is meted by men, but the concealing of the problem and its survival for longer, it is because it is also supported inside and amongst people who should be objecting to it fundamentally. But that won't happen if we do not recognize its emerging from patriarchy and socialization that keeps it alive. I will leave with you that declaration so that you share it amongst your colleagues across the board. It's an important one. We support it fully. Let me also offer that as a South African Parliament, we supported SADC Parliamentary Forum by seconding a gender activist professional to work for the SADC Parliamentary Forum and to work with the countries that belong to SADC to develop a gender strategy. That has been done and has been circulated to all countries under SADC, and it's a very useful resource because it lays the foundation for a common approach on this matter. So we should have had it in every municipality, in every department of government, and everywhere else. And Madam Speaker, as we were chatting outside, it's the poverty of our reporting responsibility, having been given a mandate to participate there, and the results thereof not being shared timelessly everywhere it matters. We would have been far in implementing that. There was an initiative to have a gender budget when Jill Marcus was the Deputy Minister of Finance, and it collapsed. Subsequently, we are saying last Friday we launched the review of the Women's Charter, and in it we go back to those issues of gender budget, responsive, gender sensitive budgeting. Like someone said, show me your budget, I'll tell you what your priorities are. Where you spend your money indicates your priorities. And so what it means is that you can't say you take gender-related issues and concerns in your area of jurisdiction when your budget, MMC for Finance, does not say so. Or the new fellow who's joined your ranks, Kotongo on his budget, when he brings there in October, I moves, heard that. Really, like yeah. We are already announcing that he's going to hear us. We have shared with you the results of the review process so that you must share it as widely as possible. We are hoping that that review of the charter and its recommendation must be present in every ward in Johannesburg. The ward committee must know what it contains so that when they interact with their various sectors, the sporting, the small business, you name them and so on. That understanding, that appreciation of gender responsive, sensitive gender budgeting is a critical component of how we must influence. We used to work in areas where wards would be given, say, 50,000 to spend the money on whatever they chose to do. And in fact, that program itself is similar. If in your assessment of what's happening in your ward, you think facilities for women are not peopled appropriately, or their infrastructure does not have enough this and that, so that a little bit can go there, whilst the broader, bigger budget can work with it in the medium to long term. It's a critical idea. I do want to add, as I step aside, to May's comments. I'm a trained trauma provider, trauma releasing exercise provider. We wish, those of us who do it, to have it present in every safety home, but also in any home. You don't have to have it. All of us, in one way or another, we have a stress profile of one kind or another. So that part of your healing will be added to in a big way. And by the way, you won't have to say a thing about what stressed you or what traumatized you. It is you, when you have gone through the process and you feel the difference, that often what happens, you do want to share some of the reasons you were stressed and so on. But otherwise, it's not a requirement. And there are job beggars who we have helped to build that capacity. They are providers, they are trained, they are in a variety of, we'll give you that resources so that you can share, you can interact with them, so that that becomes part of your response. Because let me end with these words by a man you know. Yes, sir. This is Amika Cabral, the first president of Guinea-Bissau, a friend of the South African Revolution, who said, always bear in mind that the people are not fighting for ideas, for the things in anyone's head. They are fighting to win material benefits, to live better and in peace, to see their lives go forward, to guarantee the future of their children. So when we don't do that, whose interests are we representing? Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Mr. Solomon. I think we must agree that the last question you just asked will definitely Speaker call Solomon to come and really respond to that question. We want that answer for the question you just closed your profound presentation. Thank you very much. Let me quickly call upon UN Women, which is Miss N. Kituku Shongwe, together with UN Women, he for she, Mr. Mtolisi Kaba. On the understanding the concept of he for she, as well as he for she activation. So As Ms. Shongwe comes and talks to us, immediately after she's done, quickly policy come in, and then so that we are able to quickly close our program. Over to you, Ms. Shongwe.
Good day. I'm Hazel Gooding, Deputy Representative of our UN Women South Africa Multi-Country Office. I'm speaking on behalf of Ms. Shongwe, who is our representative. Madam Speaker, honorable councillors, program directors, distinguished panelists, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I observe all protocols as I thank previous speakers for very insightful presentations. I am happy to see that the root causes were touched upon and the questions of how mental health, hunger, housing, all of these issues feed into our topic today. I'd like to appreciate also our previous speaker, activist, who shared her very personal experience as a survivor of gender-based violence. I want to also empathize with Madam Musina, who struggled with whether or not she should say she's happy to be here to be part of this conversation, as we are faced with very daunting statistics and incidences of gender-based violence within a very important month as we observe Women's Month. I was asked to speak today about the He for She campaign, and I'll do so quickly going back to the genesis of this campaign, and I would like to touch upon the He for She model that UN Women uses to address structural drivers of inequality as we try to reduce gender-based violence and HIV. It's interesting that the previous speaker touched upon the Men Engage Global Symposium, because I wanted to refer to the inaugural speech that the former UN Women Executive Director made on that occasion, and the points that she raised, which I think are very pertinent to our discussion. What I like to do is to put it into context. What are we talking about here? We are a part of a global community. We have set an expiry date for gender inequality ourselves by the year 2030. We now have a new deadline of the year 2026 in the context of generation equality. Numerous studies have shown us that with the trajectory that we were in the pre-pandemic times, that in order to achieve this deadline that we have set for ourselves, we would not be able to do so for another 50 years or more. However, more recent reports have confirmed that women and other socially disadvantaged segments of our populations have suffered the most during the pandemic. And according to the Economic Times, not closing the gender inequality gap and the lack of diversity and inclusion has an economic price tag. What is this price tag? If we continue not to do the right thing, it is costing us, as of the year 1990, from which they have started to establish a trend, it has cost us so far $70 trillion US. And it will take us another 257 years to close the gender economic gap at today's rate. And let's think about that for a moment. The report continues by saying that the pandemic alone, when women suffered the most, it has cost women $1 trillion US in income. But as we have heard, or other speakers allude to the fact that this is not a one-sided task. It doesn't affect women. This is not a women issue, I should say. it affects all segments of society, and therefore we are all part of this issue, and we are all equally expected to address it together. Obviously, we see the engagement of youth, men and boys as a game changer in shifting the power relations to end discrimination against women and to ultimately achieve gender equality. And this is what drove the launch of the He for She campaign. This campaign was launched in the year 2014, and it is a social movement campaign providing a systematic approach and targeted platform through which men and boys become agents of change for the achievement of gender equality. According to UN Women, achieving gender equality requires an inclusive approach that recognizes men and boys as partners for women's rights and acknowledges how they stand to benefit, and all of us stand to benefit from gender equality. I'll touch upon what the movement has as its 4 broad-based goals through its advocacy efforts, and I'll outline them here for us. One of them, of course, is to eliminate gender-based violence, to accelerate women's economic empowerment, to support women's role in peace and security processes, and to advance women's political participation and leadership. And I remember the executive director at the time saying the launch was a web-based launch where men were expected to go online and make a pledge. And she made the statement that we need men to go beyond just clicking on an online pledge. We need action. We need men to speak out against all forms of discrimination, to speak out against sexism, to take action to stop violence against women, to refuse to be bystanders, and to denounce it and to reject impunity, to say no to marrying young girls and to speak out against those who actually do, to challenge gender stereotypes, to share equitably in family and household responsibilities, and to be positive role models in their communities and families. This action that the UN Women Executive Director at the time called for several years ago is what we now see realized in the Generation Equality and Action Coalitions today. And she has also called on us all to extend our reach right out beyond our traditional constituencies and beyond our comfort zones. And this brings me now to what UN Women is actually working on in responding to gender-based violence and HIV by addressing what we call structural drivers of inequality. This is the aim of this project is actually to reduce violence against women and the spread of HIV through changing men's attitudes towards gender-based violence, on equal gender relationships, and their role in preventing the spread of HIV. The program consists of 2 important elements. One being community dialogues, which are held in taverns, places of worship, and other public spaces targeting individual behavioral and mindset change. The other element is advocacy, community mobilization against rape and other cultural harmful practices that increase women's vulnerability to gender-based violence and HIV. Bringing those 2 elements together, the objective is that these results and the information collected from the community dialogues and advocacy campaigns are used collectively to engage with policymakers and to make policy inputs to ensure that we are making evidence-based decisions. I would like, just before closing, just to touch on the 2-pronged approach that is being used here. We have the Young Women for Life movement, And we have the he for she community models for effectively engaging men. Speaking about the Young Women for Life movement, we have programs that exist in South Africa in 7 provinces, expanding to Botswana, Eswatini, and Lesotho. And the program focuses on psychosocial support through peer support groups and dialogues, as well as identifying and mitigating vulnerable structural drivers. On the he for she community model, there again, we have programs existing in 7 provinces in South Africa and Botswana, and we will start in Lesotho and Eswatini in due course. The program works with men in opinion-forming settings and aims at transforming views, mindsets, behavior, and practices which foster toxic masculinities, as you've heard others speak about earlier. It has been quite successful in taverns and in faith-based settings, A new program working with traditional leaders is starting in South Africa and hopefully will be replicated next year in Botswana and Lesotho. Before closing, I would just like to reiterate that it's up to all of us to take up this challenge. This is for all of us, all genders, all races, all ages, to create for ourselves the harmonious, inclusive, productive, and sustainable communities and environment that we wish for ourselves, not just today, but in our future. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for this opportunity. Over to you.
What do you say? What do you say? Okay. There I am seeing. And then? Okay. Share. Okay, it's done.
Greetings, colleagues.
Let's share on the laptop. Okay, come on, let's see. Sure. Just
Apology. Colleagues, I think I'm going to freestyle it a bit, and that's just because of time. So in the interim, as we await the preparation for the technology to operate accordingly, I'm going to request that as a collective, we claim the he for she program. Am I not audible?
The people online won't hear you.
Okay.
The people online.
Yes, colleagues, greetings. I would just like to take the opportunity as they resolve some of the technical challenges that we face, that we participate in an exercise around he for she. And that is in essence to claim the He for She program. And in so doing, what we usually invite our audience or those who are engaging in the He for She program is to express the words that are I am He for She. The I that is talking to you now on the stage currently, my name is Mkholi Skaba, but it is not only an individual claim that I make by saying I am He for She, but it's also a collective claim that I invite everyone to make. And in the beginning, what I will invite you to do is warm up your voices and repeat after me. On the fourth occasion, I will then ask that we do it collectively in a choral manner. So in beginning, please, if we could, all of us, after me, I am He for She. Now, go, but I know that the volume, the decibels, we can raise those a bit. Second opportunity, warm up. I am He for She.
I am He for She.
That sounds much better. And you know, like DJs, when they're doing the amapiano thing, sometimes they switch off the sound, and then you hear the crowd. So I would like maybe this third time just to attempt it, but this time I'm hoping to hear your voice on the mic. I am He for She.
I am He for She.
I hope you heard them. So the fourth time, I will count to 3, and we will all then, in one unified voice, state the fact that we are He for She. 1, 2, 3. I am He for She. Okay. One more time, please. 1, 2, 3.
I am He for She.
Thank you very much. You've honored me. I hope you've resolved. We have.
Okay, can you see him? Okay.
Thank you very much, colleagues.
Can you share? Okay, there it is. Okay, can you continue? Okay. Okay.
Thank you very much, colleagues, for engaging me on the call.
Can I just make this comment? I'm sorry to do this. I thought I would explain why I had taken off my mask. One of the reasons is that people who are deaf, their interpreters also want to read your lips. If they are there and you put your mask on, then it's a problem. This is why they also use masks that are transparent, so that whoever else sees them can read the mask. This is my way of suggesting to you, despite your beards, to take off your mask.
I most appreciate the advocacy for inclusivity and diversity and welcome it. Thank you very much, Speaker. Most appreciated. Accordingly, colleagues, mine is a complementary task to speak to the presentation that's already been made on behalf of UN Women as part of this multi-stakeholder forum around anti-gender-based violence advocacy. Accordingly, He for She draws its attention to a intersectional approach, speaking to various stakeholders across the spectrum. We have partnerships with universities. Currently, we have partnerships with this university, and we also have partnerships with UCT. And we're engaged within advocacy work within those constituencies and having to galvanize around the gender-based violence messaging, but also engaging young boys and young men with our partners. Accordingly, what we do when we engage is that we engage around issues like intimate partner violence. We engage on issues of gender parity in the workplace, equal work, equal pay, and advocate for that. And we also systematically engage
on issues around public governance structures and policies. So ours is not only to advocate, but also to see the change within which we want to live in. Why do we do so? Because it cannot be at a principle value-based level that the lives of our fellow citizens takes 50 years for them to realize equality. That it may take 50 years for 50% of the power to reside with 50% of the global population, which constitutes women. It's unacceptable. And it's not change to come, but it's change now that is required. One of the things as he for she advocates, as a he for she advocate that we ask ourselves is, as a man, am I he for she qualified? Are you he for she verified? We want young girls, we want women as fellow citizens to ask themselves that, are the men in your lives he for she qualified and verified? Are the boys and men in your life, communities, schools, in solidarity with women and girls against gender-based violence? Are they in solidarity for gender equality? He for she, one of the primary characteristics of he for she and one of the benefits that the communities that we've engaged with across he for she has been that he for she has served as the gender-based violence risk indicator. One, it delivers awareness. Two, it promotes a mindset shift. And three, it then engages and challenges us to begin to change our behavior. In closing, I would like to invite each and every one of us to act for equal towards a generation of equality. And in so saying, one more time, invite you to lay claim to the fact that you are all he for she advocates. At the count of three, please, colleagues, can we say that? And as we are outside after the end of this initiative, can we also take the opportunity to view pictures and images of he for she advocates? I would like to share that with you, as we can see on the screen currently, that there are messages also associated with being a he for she advocate. It's not just about being seen, but it's also about action. As we can see, a man who witnesses violence against women and does nothing is part of the problem of violence against women. Gender equality is good for everyone, boys, girls, men, and women. Join generation equality and accelerate equality. Being married or in a relationship does not entitle your partner to sex or give your partner the right to sex. Real men acknowledge and advocate for gender equality and feminist leadership. Equal pay for equal value of work is a human right. Women's rights are human rights. Fact, men can change and contribute to the safety, security, rights, and dignity of women and girls. Stop gender-based violence. Some studies indicate if women played an identical role to men in markets, as much as 28 trillion would be added to the global economy. This is the impact of not standing up for gender equality. So please take up the invitation to stand together with he for she and various stakeholders in your various formations so that we can make generation equality a reality by the year 2026. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you very much. Indeed, I am he for she. We have come to the end of our program. But before we do that, Can we immediately call SIPO to actually assist us in reading the comments, because we are live streaming on Facebook. So we've got participants there who are there, and we want to acknowledge their participation in this important program. So we therefore wish to quickly, we may not go to all of them, but just quickly go to those that we can actually quickly read so that we hear what are their inputs and comments. Is SIPO ready? Oh, perfect.
Dumelang bagolo, greetings to everybody here today. Ntate Speaker, Deputy Speaker of Parliament, Rahulumeli Santate, Madam Speaker, and to our panelists. There are so many questions and comments on social media, and I thought what we will do, I'll just look at some of the important ones, not that the others are not. A quick one on one of the chat groups on Zoom. This one says, Amen. We need to start healing from the root and not from the symptom. Let's heal the boy child. Bua. Tuli Ndebele says, I've taught my boys to cry. It has helped them to deal with their anger issues. Desiree Anita Aren says, I'm part of a GBV group. There is youth that wants to join a GBV group. Why can't government empower those girls by involving them and communities and have programs where they can engage? She further goes on to say the boy child needs to be educated. Also, Ndumiso Mtembu says, thank you for sharing, and may Nosika and Lost Soul rest in peace. Thank you, MMC Mfikwe. Matileng Becky says, parents are to stop having arguments, swearing, and fight in the presence of children, as that will seem normal to a child when they grow up. Desiree says, I was abused physically, and till today, this man is abusing me emotionally. That is why I joined the GBV group. SAPs don't take the GBV issue serious. Only when it's a women's month, you will see them acting after that is done. Rina Mtlachana says there's really too much work that needs to be done. The first task at hand is to struggle to have no coalition government. Okay, that's on another issue. Tulindebele says, I've taught my boys to cry. It has helped them to deal with their anger issues. I think, Madam, let me end there. But thank you very much to everybody who is logging on our social media platforms and is commenting on our Facebook pages. Thank you very much, leadership.
Thank you very much. Most definitely, we just 1 hour, 30 minutes behind time. And really, we must apologize to all of you. And indeed, apologize, Speaker, for my late arrival. I hope in future programs will not close me outside because I arrived late. So, but also let me take this opportunity to really thank all our panelists, the MMCs that has contributed to this important program, and indeed our own Solomon. I almost sang the Solomon revolutionary song, but I'll sing it outside as we walk out. In those words, let me quickly invite to the podium the Speaker of council to give us a vote of thanks. And over to you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, program directors, Councillor Sesedinyana, the councillor of the area of this ward where we are. Thank you very much for welcoming us in your ward and also program directing this important program. And thank you very much to the program director who started, Ntagane Zamba from the Speaker's office. She's not well, she had to leave. Thank you very much to our panelists. I am not going to mention all of you by name now, but thank you so much for this rich information that you have shared here today. And there's Solomon. The dipstick has not been put in a wrong hole this time around. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for being on the ground. Every time we call upon you, you're not saying now you are busy with national parliament issues, but you come on the ground. You are so grounded. We really appreciate to have a leader like yourself. All our speakers who have spoken today, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing your pain, my lady. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to all the speakers, to MMCs, for sharing the programs that are in place. Thank you very much to the team that has been preparing for this event, especially the team that we have partnered with as the City of Johannesburg. Dr. Fundile Nyati's team, I saw Nwabisa is here. Dr. Nyati is also connected online. We have this informative session every Wednesday. We just changed the time this Wednesday. Every Wednesday at 6:30. If you could tune in and follow us on our platforms as shared, I think Sipo will come up and share the platforms where we are available. The talk with the speaker every Wednesday. And we call experts every Wednesday on different topics, 6:30 up until 7:30. And we have also been joined by our local media, our radios, Bojo's FM, Eldos, Chai FM, so, and the Joburg Pulse. So we are joined by different local media platforms every 6:30 on Wednesdays. Please join us. A lot has been said here today, Program Director Dr. Sedinyana. And given the inputs that have been made, really my parting shot would be to say that let us ensure that all our plans, deliberations become a reality, because women and children of our society are dependent on all of us. So it should not just be talk shows because it's August, it's Women's Month. In fact, I believe that Women's Month is every month and Women's Day is every day, 365 days of the year. So it should not just be talk shows, but we should be implementing what we are talking about. We are giving a hope. All our speakers that have spoken here have given hope to the vulnerable, to those who are abused. And so let us really implement. Let us empower our women, and the empowerment of our women involves all our participation, not only women alone, but the fact that we had men who spoke here today. We had our deputy speaker here sharing information. He has already shared the documents that he promised with me. So I will try and share those documents as he promised, that information, so that we are further empowered. So as local government, we are committed, as you have heard from our MMCs, we are committed to work with our society in fighting gender-based violence, but it should not only be for government, but for all of us. So I implore us as women to never tire in ensuring that our plight is heard and that it is attended to. So, so all of us, we have to work towards ending this sketch. As I am parting short, I want to quote what Dr. Madiba once said when he said, I quote, "Of course, the task will not be easy, but not to do this would be a crime against humanity, against which I ask all humanity now to rise up," close quote. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us rise together. This is not just a woman's problem, as I said, it is a societal problem. So let us rise together as a society, as a people, and bring back Ubuntu, because the abuse of women and children, these killings of women, is against Ubuntu. As Councillor Mfikwe has said, MMC Mfikwe, that we have launched a moral regeneration movement in the city. Moral regeneration movement is also having their outreach programs where we are trying by all means to bring back Ubuntu and to do away with the moral decay that has affected our societies. So let us expand on programs such as these ones and many other programs to our NGOs. Please invite us, involve us when you do your programs, because together we can do more. And with that said, let me thank all of you for participating. Thank you, those who are online. Thank you for your inputs. And those who are here this evening, thank you very much for having put everything aside and you participated in this. So let us work together 365 days of the year in making sure that our women and girls are safe in the hands of the society. Thank you very much, Program Director. I am not going to close the session. You are going to close the session because you are Program Director. I was just doing vote of thanks. Thank you.
No, thank you very much. I think we've come to the end of the program. I think what we'll need now is to officially would be to officially close the program with the announcements. Sipo, I hope is ready with those announcements quicker. And as soon as I finish with announcements, we'll just have some photo taken here. Are you ready, Sipo? Oh, okay.
I'm ready.
Yeah.
Thank you, Program Director. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and all the panelists for a very informative session. Madam Speaker, in her office, will continue with these civic education programs. You can easily follow her page, go Facebook, Ke Nongceba Mulwele, Speaker of Council. You can follow updated information about Council and their programs. You can also go to COJ, City of Johannesburg, on Facebook. You can also go to YouTube. You'll find Councillor Nongceba Mulwele there. And also on Twitter, Speaker_COJ. Please follow these social media platforms and be informed about what is happening in the City of Johannesburg. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Siabonga. In the meantime, for people who low profile. Thank you very much, everybody, including those online. Thank you. Okay. Siso, usha into zakho.
Oh, all right.